So life truly is an adventure. It is filled with twists and turns and good times and bad times. It's filled with triumphs and failures. And when we think back about our life and all of that stuff, we also see that there's this really sweet thread of joy running somewhere through all of those things called our life. I have never met a person whose life wouldn't make a fantastic movie. We humans do such interesting things. Now, I'm not just talking about the giants of history or the giants of our time. I'm talking about us, the regular people of the world. The ones that go about our lives, sometimes in a quiet way, being a part of our families, experiencing what it is to fall in love and to love truly, what it is to forgive others and to seek forgiveness, all the while trying to do some good on our way as we live our lives. As we try to eke out or find some happiness, and maybe have more than just a few laughs along the way. That's the beauty of our life. We humans are truly amazing creatures, absolutely. Our stories are rich and they're deep and they're profound, even if we don't always think that they are. Truth is, we don't always appreciate our own stories as much as we probably should. Perhaps because we're just too close to our own lives and we can't always see the specialness of them. We can't see maybe the real triumphs we have made or see the lessons that we've learned along the way. Can't always call to mind the love that we have known. And for sure, we don't always see how the world would be so much less if we weren't here. In some ways, we are blind to the epic nature of how we have lived and are living out our lives. I think this is especially true in our faith lives. In his book, Why Preach, Why Listen, William Mule suggests that on any given Sunday, many people sitting in the pews almost didn't come that day. They considered staying at home. Now, not because they had something better to do, mind you, as if there is anything more fun than coming to church on Sunday morning. There's not, of course. Right? But because in their minds, their faith didn't quite measure up to the faith of the others in the congregation. And he calls this a faith inferiority complex. In my own ministry, this has proven to be a real thing. It's a real thing. So many times I have heard people express their own faith inferiority complex. They have doubts. They have questions. They have faith, but wonder how much belief they have. And they wonder if any of that's important, if all of it's important. And if the truth be known, there have been times where well-meaning, but sometimes misguided preachers like myself have only added to the sense of faith inferiority when we use Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. and Mother Teresa as examples of what it means to be a faithful disciple of Jesus. And when that happens, when we do that, how can any of us measure up? We simply can't. Which brings us to the story from Acts, right? Another story where we kind of feel like maybe our faith doesn't measure up. Saul, who later became known as Paul, is yet another giant in the faith, whose story can make us feel quite inferior. We know Paul mostly from the many letters he wrote to the early churches. He led an incredibly successful mission to the Gentiles throughout Asia Minor, and along with his writing, which came before any of the other books that eventually became the New Testament, pretty much set the theological stage for the church as we know it. It can be said that we're here in church because of what Paul did all those years ago. So truly, he is a giant in terms of our faith history. But he's a giant with a very checkered past. He was no angel. Prior to our reading today, Saul, as he was known, was a persecutor of the early followers of the risen Christ. He actively sought out followers to either persuade them to give that foolishness up, or if they refused to give that foolishness up, he was to orchestrate their execution. Well, now that's big stuff, right? And so today, our story, we find him riding to Damascus, armed with letters from the religious elites, which gave him the authority to kill and destroy anyone who claimed Christ and chose to live the Jesus way, the way of love and compassion. But on his journey, just outside town, he has an experience that changes him, changes everything about him. He sees that blinding light, he's knocked to the ground, and in this encounter with the truth is asked why he is breathing such threats and murder against the followers of Jesus. He has no answer to give. He is rendered almost speechless and certainly rendered blind by his experience. And as we heard his helpers take him to a house in Damascus, and there he stays, waiting for his sight to return, waiting for his life to make sense. Who knows? He's there and he's waiting. He's had an experience for sure, but he hasn't been able to make sense of any of it yet. The only thing he knows is that what he once believed so fervently, that people following the Jesus way were wrong and were dangerous, that the people who were following the Jesus way were a threat to God and all that was holy, that somehow all of what he believed was truly misguided and incredibly wrong. So that's in the place that Paul's in, that emotional place. If the truth be known, many of us have some discomfort with the story of Saul's conversion. I know certainly I do, because we compare it with our own faith lives. And since not many of us have had a blinding light sent from God, never had a disembodied voice speak to us from a shimmering cloud, we can become somewhat dismissive of our own faith experiences, and I think that's true. We feel less than. We feel inferior than. But it's important to remember that this story made it in, if you will, or is noteworthy, precisely because it's not typical of how most people become converts, how most people become more faithful. Most people experience their own conversions as a more gentle series of turnings. You know, a growing and a learning followed by a commitment to follow a new way of living in this world. Certainly that's true in my own life. My own faith life has been a series of gentle turnings. Of course, the story that follows the story that we heard read today of Saul being blinded by the light, it's the next story is where the real meaning of this whole episode is revealed. The part you didn't hear read was how Ananias, a follower of the Jesus way in Damascus, one of the very people that Saul was coming to persecute, how this guy feels called by God to go to Saul and help him. To me, Ananias is the real hero of this story, the real giant of the faith, if you will. Ananias, a regular person who had absolutely everything to lose by reaching out to someone who was determined to destroy him and all that he holds dear. But despite all of his fear and loathing for this man Saul, this dangerous man Saul, Ananias goes and reaches out anyway. That's what it is to be a giant in the faith. When Ananias goes to Saul and holds Saul's hands and speaks words to Saul, as the story tells us, that the scales drop from Saul's eyes. And for the first time, he sees the truth of the Jesus way. For the very first time, things become clear. They fall into place. He sees what matters. He sees that God is not about the keeping of every single letter of the law. God is not about correct belief or proper worship or a dogmatic belief. But the God is about the faith that is born out of loving actions, out of hearts built around forgiveness, people who are determined to do the work of reconciliation. That's what it is to follow the way. That's faith. And so Saul sees clearly for the first time, and that is when his conversion happened. Not when he got knocked to the ground by the blinding light. His conversion happened here, where Ananias reached out to him. Now, not many of us are breathing threats and murder against our opponents. That's not something we typically do. However, all of us, from time to time, and this might come as a shock, all of us from time to time have maybe been a bit stubborn. Not me, but maybe some of you. All of us have been on the wrong paths from time to time, paths that have been hurtful to others or to ourselves. We have at times been a little bit headstrong, blinded by our own sense of what is right and what must happen. But there has come a time, if you think back in your life, there has come a time where you see the light, where we suddenly open our eyes and we see another way of doing things. We see another way of being in the world. And when we open our eyes, when we see the light, it changes us. In fact, it changes our whole lives. And sometimes it fills us with a bit of fear and loathing as well, right? Because when we have been wrong, sometimes walking the right path involves making things right. So making things right with ourselves, or making things right with those we have hurt, or making things right with those who have hurt us. So we are very much like Saul. Our conversions are very much like his. There comes a day when we see the light and we are changed by what we have seen and changed by what we have heard. So none of us have anything to feel inferior about, because each one of us walks among the faith giants. Yet aside from personal faith inferiority complexes overcome, I think the story of Saul and Ananias is most powerful when we who are gathered let it speak to us as a gathered community, when we let this story speak to us as a church. You see, what emerged after Saul and Ananias' encounter was a whole new way of being church in the world, a whole new way. Both men had things to overcome, things that they had held on to, thinking that they were of the utmost importance, things that they now had to let go of if they were to truly follow Jesus. Ananias had to let go of his fear and his loathing. And Saul had to let go of his zeal for correct and sanctioned doctrine and belief and proper practices. So both men had to step out of their comfort zones and step into the new reality of the world in which they now found themselves. The same is true for us as a community of faith. We are poised on just as powerful a shift in the church life as Saul and Ananias were. What worked or seemed right and noble in the past doesn't always seem as effective as they once did. It doesn't seem as effective in the present. The world has changed. And so now it becomes all of our job to figure out how then we must change, what we must let go of, and what and who we must now embrace, if we're to meet the challenges of our society and our call to bring light to one another's lives. What do we need to let go of? What do we need to embrace? Yesterday, the board spent all day talking about this very thing. What is God calling us to let go of? And how is the Spirit leading us into new, and how is the Spirit leading us into new ways of being? This is no small task. But they did exemplary work. But it's not the board's task alone. Each one of us, whether we have been coming and attending First United since Jesus was a boy, or whether today is our first time, right? We've all been gifted with the task of letting some things go as a church, letting some things go as a community of faith, even if we have held them close to our hearts for a very long time. We need to be about the task of determining what's central to our faith. What does it mean to have faith in Salmon in 2016? And so what is essential to our faith and what has become mere decoration or habit? That is what each one of us is being asked to discern as we gather as a community. And if this task feels big, good, because it is big. It's a big task, but it's a task worth doing because just like it did for Ananias and Saul, it will bring us new life, abundant life. And that is what the divine promise is all about, new and abundant life. And so my prayer is, may it be so in your life and in mine.